Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how the mental game works. And that is, I'm going to be exploring with you a unified theory of how we experience the world. Now, that is a big promise. And we're going to do it in less than half an hour. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, Owen, is this going to be one of those episodes where you're going to go through and bombard us with lots and lots of different information and overwhelm us and make us feel like, oh my goodness, this is way too much? And the answer is yes, it is. So, buckle up, strap on the mental seatbelt. Wherever you are, make sure that you're focused. You can be, I don't know, maybe you're out running, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're listening to this in the car, whatever you're doing, make sure you're focused on what you need to be doing to be safe. But at the same time, enter the world of psychology, neuroscience, the brain, the mind, and let's talk about what is going on. So here's where the idea for this particular episode came from. Over the last few years, I've obviously been taking a lot of the insights I gained in my studies in psychology and my studies in terms of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, my understanding of hypnosis, my understanding of screenwriting and storytelling, and I've been trying to figure out how does everything fit together. So in order to be able to create change, in order to be able to live a happy or healthy or successful life, how does everything fit together? And what I want to do is propose to you how we think, and I want to use neuroscience and a really great insight around neuroscience as being the foundation to explain what actually goes on in our mind and our brain, the differences between the two, and how all of the different technologies and tools from NLP to hypnosis to meditation to cognitive behavioral therapy, right the way through to all forms of therapy and different ways of being able to help us to change, how they all fit together. And that's what I'm looking to do today. So just to start off with, I want to explore a theory of the brain in terms of the way in which the brain works. And this is something that I became familiar with based upon the great work of Lisa Feldman Barrett, a wonderful neuroscientist. And in a nutshell, in understanding how we feel what we feel, in understanding how emotions are made, Professor Barrett talks about the fact that your brain is in a black box inside your head, and it's got three sources of information to be able to sift through. The first source of information is interoception. This means that the brain connects with the rest of your body and figures out what's going on in your body. The second element or area is exteroception, or your senses. So this takes in information through your various senses, what you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you touch, taste, and smell, et cetera, et cetera. And then it takes in the information and starts to figure out what's happening on the outside. And then the final source of information is in the memories or concepts that we've built in terms of our past experience. And what happens is that your brain in this black box takes this information in and tries to figure out what's going on, because your brain's job is to predict what's going to happen next to keep you alive. So your brain is going, I need to figure out how to keep this person alive. So what is the information that I need in order to do that? It takes a collection of those three sources of information and it figures out what to adjust inside of you and what to adjust outside of you. So what to adjust inside of you is the feelings it creates, the neurochemistry that it triggers, the hormones that it releases in your system. Then there's the outside of you, which is the actions that you take. And then there's also, based upon all of that, it's also going to influence and affect the memories or concepts. Because again, as you take those actions and as you experience the world, you're then taking the experience and then you're bringing that experience into your head as a memory or as a concept as well. So I think it's important to start off from that point of view, because to me, I see there are three different types of worlds that we need to work on. And there's the inner world, there's the outer world, and there's also the somatic world. And the somatic world is really the body, the world of the body. And just like we need to be able to change what we're experiencing externally, what we're experiencing in terms of our bodies, and also the memories or concepts, to me, the inner world of memories and concepts, the outer world of what's going on outside of us, and then the somatic world of what's going on inside of our bodies are three different areas where we can intervene. And as a result of our intervention, it can literally shift the way in which we experience the world. So I want to walk you through the inner world, the outer world, and the somatic world. And I'm hoping that this is a fresh and new and empowering way of thinking about all of the different technologies we have to be able to make changes. And so let's start by talking about the inner world. To me, the inner world primarily has core elements that we need to start to address or adjust. The first is belief. And belief obviously is the cornerstone of what I call belief leadership, the area that I've been developing and working on. And beliefs really are ideas we feel certain about. So it's like thoughts, but thoughts that we're certain about, thoughts that we act on, thoughts we have a great strength of conviction in. And so your beliefs tend to dictate quite a lot about how you interpret the world. So when you change your beliefs about what's happened in the past, it changes the experience of what's happened in the past for you. You literally change the memories that you have about those past experiences. So your beliefs certainly will change what's going on in terms of your concepts and memories. Your emotions also play a big part. There's a notion called effective realism, which is that our beliefs are in many ways triggered by the emotions we feel at any moment in time. So when you feel a certain way, that dictates how you experience the world, this notion of effective realism. And so similarly, too, the way in which we experience things and the way in which we create concepts in our mind or memories in our mind will not just be the product of what's actually happened to us, but will be the product of how we feel about what's happened to us. So our feelings literally affect the way we remember things, which is important. There's also where we put our focus. So what thoughts we focus on. A large part of focus is the thinking we do. So whatever we choose to think about, whatever questions we ask ourselves, whatever requests we make. And in the past, I talked about brain prompting. So in many ways, brain prompting is one of the things we can focus on. We learn to focus on things by asking questions, by being able to make requests of ourselves, and that streamlines our thinking so that we start to think on purpose, as Dr. Richard Bandler would say. And then stories, a big piece of the belief leadership model, but also a big piece of how we function in the world are the stories that we tell ourselves. So the concepts and memories we have are really put in the frame of a story. It's a story we tell ourselves about what happened, as opposed to remembering verbatim exactly what happened in that moment. So these four areas are the critical components of the inner world that we need to work on. So that begs the question, how do we work on that? How do we train the mind or change the mind internally? Well, in terms of training the mind, there's strategies such as mindfulness. And this could be the mindfulness of Jon Kabat-Zinn. This was mindfulness as a way of reducing stress. This is more of a spiritual take on mindfulness. The notion that came about in the 70s of being able to stay in the moment, being non-judgmental, very similar to a lot of the philosophies or approach of Buddhism and meditation. But again, not just meditating, but being able to be mindful of whatever's happening and staying in the present, some of the stuff that Eckhart Tolle familiarized us with in his great book, The Power of Now. But mindfulness is a wonderful tool that we can get better at, a skill that we can work on. But there's another notion of mindfulness, another concept called mindfulness that was actually created by a psychologist called Ellen Langer. Now, Ellen Langer is a very well-known psychologist in the field, has been involved in a lot of great research around everything from the power of the word because to some great work she's done around our mindset around aging. And Ellen Langer came up with a concept around about the same time called mindfulness, where it's more about paying attention to what's new and being more in the moment of noticing what's happening in the world, noticing what's going on, noticing the newness of every moment. Both of those are great techniques or approaches to help us to train our brain to be better at focusing and to be better at creating the kind of experiences, diminishing how intense the emotions can affect us. So mindfulness, certainly both forms can be very advantageous and indeed help us when it comes to being able to be aware of the beliefs that we have. So we're not as attached to the belief. Then we have meditation, which again helps us to do this. This helps us improve our focus, concentrations, different forms of meditation. There's transcendental meditation, of course. There's mindfulness meditation. There's using different mantras, whatnot. But all of them really help us to be able to get into a habit where we're training ourselves to be able to focus, training ourselves to disconnect from the natural, habitual sort of default mode network, if you will, of the brain, where the brain just mind wanders and allows us to take more control. You also have hypnosis, where you're able to not just help us to be able to focus more, but also helps us to relax and use our imagination better. And we have things like non-sleep deep rest, which are ways to be able to relax, yoga nidra, different forms of being able to train ourselves to enter a different frame of mind, a sort of a trance state where we are able to make suggestions and visualize things that we want to achieve. And then we also have the application of neuroscience. So learning about the different neurochemicals such as dopamine and serotonin, by being able to learn how to trigger the release of the kinds of neurochemicals we want when we need them, that certainly can affect the beliefs we have, the emotions we feel, not to mention where our focus goes. And all of that in turn will affect the stories that we are telling ourselves in that moment in time. So those are some examples of the kinds of things that you can learn to get better at to be able to train your mind. But what about changing your mind? What are the kinds of things that can help you to change your mind more effectively? Well, you've got philosophies like Stoicism or Zen Buddhism, which are wonderfully powerful in their ability to help us to think differently about the world, getting us to recognize that, we will experience suffering, we will experience adversity, but we don't always have to allow it to dictate the way in which we feel. So philosophies like that can certainly affect the beliefs we hold, the mindsets we have, the emotions we feel. Psychological approaches like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, reality therapy, the various forms of cognitive behavioral therapies out there that tend to be quite useful. Logotherapy, that was popularized and created by Viktor Frankl, the wonderful author of the incredible book, Man's Search for Meaning and Finding Meaning or Experiences. All of those are examples of great psychological approaches that are out there. There's also NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, of course, created by Dr. Richard Bandler and John Grinder back in the 1970s, which allows you to have an array of tools for you to be able to change the way you're thinking. And not just to change the way you're thinking, it also helps you to train your mind more effectively as well. And then you have the area of behavioral economics, which is being more aware of the biases we have and why we make the wrong kind of decisions we make when we make them. And of course, positive psychology, which is the study of positive qualities like the study of our strengths, the study of things like happiness, and teaching us how we can become happier and how we can lean more into our strengths in those ways. Those are just some examples of the kinds of things we can do for the inner world. Then we have the outer world. And the outer world are things like, first of all, the habits that we engage in. So it's really the habits, the actions we take in the real world that can change what's going on in our lives. So when you change your habits, you'll change your life. And the notion is there that habits are the actions that you take consistently. There's also the goals that you set for yourself, where you set yourself a target of what you want to achieve, and then you create steps to help you to achieve that. So it could be lifestyle goals, which are really habit goals, or it could be achievement goals or development goals, where you want to get a certain result, and therefore you create the sort of steps that will lead you towards that. And then there's influence from an outer world perspective. And this is how we influence the world, how we influence other people. And this is learning skills like popularized by people like Robert Cialdini, who wrote that great book, Influence, right? About the 7 principles of influence: scarcity, social proof, likability, authority, reciprocity, commitment and consistency, and of course, unity. And those principles that allow us to be more effective at influencing and persuading, not just those. Aristotle with his ethos and pathos and logos, and a large part of the field of belief leadership in an area I call sway better is really about helping you to be more effective at influencing other people. Influence has been a big passion of mine and very important. And also a big part of influence and a big part of influencing or impacting the world is stories, the stories we tell other people. You will change so many lives through the stories that you tell, because the stories you tell take whatever experiences are happening, and it's you interpreting those experiences, translating those experiences into insights. And so storytelling is a remarkably powerful way of impacting the world. So how do we work on these elements? What are the things we can do in the outer world to be more effective? Well, to master behavioral change, there's a lot of insights we can gain around habit science. For those of you who are members of my Changing Minds monthly membership, which you can join, one of the schools that I created there is a 2 to 3 hour course, what I call Habit School, which walks you through everything you need to know about the science of habits and how to apply it to your life. You also have great books like The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, some great books around influencing yourself to engage in new habits. There's strategic thinking. This is your ability to think about your future and scenario plan and decide what are the steps you're going to take to create the kind of life you want, planning to organize your life. And then life designing your life with all the various different goals and all the different habits that you want to have, and starting to take control over how you create the kind of environment, the kind of community, the kind of experiences that you want in order for you to be as happy and as successful as you possibly can as well. So there's some examples of things we can do to master behavioral change. And then also in terms of mastering influence, we have obviously the world in the field of rhetoric, which from Cicero and Aristotle, we've learned a lot of what makes people say yes, what allows us to be able to influence others, what is the language of influence. We have in many ways behavioral economics, which teaches us once again not just about our own decisions, but how to leverage the fact that other people make decisions in a certain way. So how can we nudge them and organize environments to make it easier for them to say yes to what we want them to say yes to? How can we prime them in the most effective way? We have influence psychology, the work that I talked about in terms of Robert Cialdini, and not just Cialdini, but a whole host of other experts like Jonah Berger. A lot of the research done out there on how we can help change people's minds, and even some of the tools of neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience, and neuromarketing to be able to understand what are the things that we can do and the things that are actually done on a regular basis to us by very sophisticated marketing experts to be able to get us to say yes. Being able to impact the world means learning and knowing about these kind of ideas, which is, again, a big passion of mine. And then we also have NLP and the language of influence. So the language of influence in NLP is things like the meta model or the Milton model in NLP, which are language models that helps us to challenge beliefs and change beliefs and influence and persuade more people. Some great insights from NLP. And also mind-changing technologies. These are things like street epistemology, which is similar enough to the Socratic method of questioning, but really a great way of helping people to change their mind. We have motivational interviewing, again, another great approach towards changing minds, as well as then deep canvassing, which was a remarkable tool, a remarkable approach that helped create political change from a social perspective only just over 10 years ago or so. So what you have is you've a vast array of tools that could be used to be able to influence the world more effectively as well, which is great. And then the final world that we have, as well as the inner world and the outer world, is the somatic world. And the somatic world is really about our bodies, about what's going on. And obviously, the elements here would be, first of all, health. How healthy you are is going to influence the way in which you experience the world. Your physicality, that's your posture, the way in which you move, the way in which you stand or sit, your body language is going to affect that. Your sensory experience, so how you interpret the experience that you have and what you expose yourself to experiencing in the world, what environment you put yourself into. There's the movement, the way in which you move, and this is everything from exercise right the way through to the way in which you move your body and form. And then there's the energy that you have and how you stimulate and maximize and optimize the amount of energy that you have. All of these are elements that will impact and influence how you experience the world, right? So your health, your physicality, your sensory experience, your movement, and your energy. And so what are some of the, first of all, ways we can master our bodies? And what are ways that we can, some techniques we can use to be able to work on our bodies? Well, first of all, in terms of mastering your bodies, you got the basics. You got nutrition being critical. Yeah, what you eat, what you take into your body is crucial for all those areas, from energy to your health, to your physicality and whatnot. You've got water, the importance of drinking lots of water. You've got sleep, and getting optimal amounts of sleep will make a huge difference to all of these areas. You've got the amount of exercise you engage in and making sure you get in regular amounts of exercise. All of these will impact the way in which your brain is functioning, and therefore will impact the way in which you experience reality. And then we've got things like movement, everyday movement. So that's the amount that you walk, the amount that you get up and sit. So you're not sitting for long spells, long periods of time in the one place. There is awareness, your physical awareness, being more aware of your body, recognizing and noticing what's going on in your body a bit more. And then also things like breathing techniques. And we'll talk more about breathing in a moment, but simply learning to breathe more effectively can help overall regulate your nervous system more effectively and help you then, once again, to optimize your brain function and therefore to change your experience with the world. And then in terms of techniques, you got a whole host of techniques. You got things like yoga and Tai Chi and Pilates and body work and even dance, which again gets you starting to shift a lot of the ways in which you're interacting. Even martial arts provides you with a way of using your body such that you're able to express a lot of what's going on inside. And expressing some of your emotions physically can be a wonderful tool that can dramatically help improve the way in which you feel and the way in which you experience your reality. So becoming more physical and using some of those different forms, those techniques can help. Breathing techniques, as I mentioned already, can be very advantageous. When you breathe differently, it literally shifts your emotions. It changes the way in which you feel because we have emotions that are connected to certain patterns of breathing. So the wonderful work of people like Wim Hof provide you with a great array of tools that can, really benefit you that way. Got things like cold exposure therapy, where, the cold showers and the cold bath, the ice baths and whatnot, and again, stimulate the release of a bunch of different hormones and transmitters and whatnot, and gets you primed. It can help with motivation and whatnot. Obviously, you got to be careful with regards to if you've got heart conditions and whatnot, but at the same time, cold exposure therapy is very popular at the moment. And stress exposure, exposing yourself to certain things that exercise in many ways is like that. High interval intensity training is like that. You're pushing yourself. And by exposing yourself to experiences, even with some breathing techniques where your adrenaline is pumping and you're finding yourself in highly stressful situations, but you're controlling them, that can certainly help you massively to be able to handle whenever you are in stressful situations that aren't under your control. You can get more comfortable in stress, in other words, by exposing yourself that way. And then we also have certain therapeutic techniques like EMDR, e-movement, desensitization, and reprocessing in terms of moving your eyes and how that shifts things. The havening technique, somatic experiencing, and that's really about being able to experience what's going on in your body and being able to make shifts in the way in which you physically experience it. An EFT, emotional freedom technique, or thought field therapy, TFT is another one. There's a whole host, and I'm not turning around and saying these all definitely work or these are all definitely beneficial. You have to check to see your own experiences and what you think and what you feel yourself. But what is important and what is critical is that you give yourself the chance to be able to look at what are the things that you can do to be able to improve how you experience the world somatically. So one of the things that a lot of people wonder about is, how do I change my life? How do I change the way I'm feeling? How do I change my patterns and whatnot? And I think when you look at the fact that we've got an inner world, we got an outer world, and then we got a somatic world, then you've got three different areas that you can go into and make shifts on, three different levels that you can shift your experience of life in. So you can play around and change your somatic experience of the world. You can change what you're doing inside your head, the stories you're telling, the beliefs you're having, again, through the psychological tools, and train yourself in that way. And you can get your actions right. You can get yourself to be engaging the kind of habits and disciplines that build the kind of life. You can maximize how you're influencing the world. To me, when we bring everything together like that, we see a holistic, unified way of thinking about the way we experience the world. And therefore, it can provide us with some much needed clarity in a world where there's so many different things that are happening. And this is not an exhaustive list. There's lots of other ways to be able to change your mind, to be able to change the way your body is experiencing life, or to be able to change what's happening outside of you. But to me, this is a great start. And over the course of the Change Your Minds podcast, I'm hoping to be able to tackle in and deep dive into some of these different areas and elements and tools so I can help you to be able to make the shifts that you need to make in those three areas. So I hope you found that useful. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, like a lot. And I'm hoping that this is something that you can use moving forward to make positive differences to the way in which you feel, both internally, both externally, and all the way through your body. For now, thanks very much for watching and listening. May the force continue to be with you, and may you continue to share and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. But may you most of all continue to believe better. Bye for now.